Today we've got a very interesting speaker with a very interesting story and a very interesting product. And I'd like to welcome on stage and give him a round of applause, Frank from MySugr. Okay, Frank. It's great that we are speaking English because, as far as I know, you're from Germany, and
Yeah,
so that everybody can understand you.
don't expect a perfect TH, okay?
Oh, sorry. That's okay. It's okay. So, can you give us a bit of a background? Where do you come from? Where did you grow up? First 3 years of your life, or maybe 10 years, 18 years of your life. What did you like? Where do you come from?
Yeah, so well, I mean, the first rather 20 years of my life I spent in a very wonderful town in the very western part of Germany. It's called Kempen, Kempen am Niederrhein, my hometown. So, and yeah, so basically I was born there, I grew up there, and I did my A levels there, and yeah, and afterwards I went on to university and that stuff.
What's your family background? Is there any entrepreneurs in your family, or are you the first weird guy in the family?
I'm really the first weird guy. So my parents are both teachers and rather preferred a conservative way for me as well. And I also start as just a simple employed guy at a company. So
So how did you end up from the wonderful, great urban area of Kempten? Kempen? How do you say Kempen?
Kempen.
Kempen. I thought Kempten. Whatever. How did you came to Vienna? Like,
Yeah, that's a very nice story because I think I was 23 and I made an internship in Berlin with CNN. Very interesting at a very interesting time, and there I got to know my wonderful wife. She's from Vienna, and yeah, we are married, and right now I mean it's 13 years ago I think, and yeah, that it's the end of the day that it was her who brought me to Vienna.
she was living in Vienna.
Back then, she also made an internship in Berlin, and she's Viennese. She studied back in the days in Krems, but still was living in Vienna. Yeah.
As far as I can remember, we talked about that at some stage in your life. It was you living in Vienna or being in Vienna, and her not being in Vienna.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had a bit of a back and forth between Germany and Austria, and like. The weird thing was when we actually started MySugr in 2011, we lived in Berlin, and I commuted basically every week from 2012 to 2014 from Berlin to Vienna. She was working in Berlin for the Austrian Tourism Federation, and yeah, that was a bit of a weird setup because I mean she's from Vienna, living in Berlin. I'm working in Vienna, so yeah.
So your professional background, but what did you start off your career as a first job, and how did you proceed to then become an entrepreneur in the health scene? So let's start with the start off part of it.
Yeah, so my first job was I was a paper boy, so I mean that's probably a very common start for the first job, but I mean, after my studies, I studied business administration in Germany and in France, and always worked beside my studies in a tech sector rather, so in the internet and in TV world. And the point is, in the age of 20, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and yeah, and so that is, I mean, that's the whole reason why we started to create MySugr, because in 2010 my diabetes therapy got in a not so well state, and I was thinking about how smartphones can help me in my therapy, and yeah, that was, I mean, the initial spark to create what's today MySugr. And of course, that was a long journey from the first thought, meeting the right people who also are interested in working in that field. But in the end of the day, it's my personal story who brought me into the healthcare sector, because before I would never have expected that I end up there.
Yeah, you did a lot of stuff with IPTV and stuff like that, and then you were consulting as far as I know.
Yeah, yeah. So my first job, my first real job kind of thing was I worked for Telekom Austria. I was the first product manager of what's I think today it's called A1 TV. So it's the IPTV product, and back in the days it was in 2005, 2004. Telekom Austria was really one of the first telco in the whole of Europe who launched an interactive TV service, and that was an awesome job to start with. A very nice team back in the days, and I loved it a lot. And so it was my first job, and was also kind of the sector where I kicked off my career. I worked for 3 days for 3 years for Telekom Austria, and after that, I went back to Germany with the experience of having launched such a product which was pretty new to the whole market, and I started to work for a German telco company which was called Freenet. Some of you may know that company. And also, started to introduce such an IPTV product for them in the German market. And and then I made a bit of a back and forth in some startup companies in Berlin. And after 3 years, I joined a consultant company in Munich who was specialized in interactive TV consulting services. And and then for that company, I worked 3 years. Then.
So that was your last gig, basically.
That was Before I started MySugr, I was working for that consultancy. Yeah.
Okay. Right. And so how did that actually happen? That you're a co-founding team of 4? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
How did that phase go till from? Where did that idea actually shape in your mind, and how did you find your co-founders? How did that initial phase of from idea to okay, let's do this and doing the first step? How did they work? How did that work out?
That was. I mean, from today, it's really funny how you meet people, and how you meet the right people and how you motivate them. It was the case that one co-founder, Gerald, I knew him for a couple of years already, and we shared so many ideas and started project. A part of MySugr, we simply wanted to start something, and we were thinking through a couple of ideas, and with some we were pretty advanced. But then I had this problem with my personal diabetes therapy, and we found more and more interest in that space, because we thought it's much. It gives back much more than, for example, I don't know, introducing a new advertising company, or we were thinking about price comparison machines. So, like kind of the normal stuff, and and we found that topic much more interesting. And one very important thing was that we met Frederick. I don't know, some of you guys may know him. He has diabetes as well, and then it was the 3 of us, and who were shaping the concept, and kind of also started to think through a first prototype. And the 4th co-founder came a couple of months after we officially kicked off MySugr. It was Michael, and he joined us as our CTO back then. And with him in the team, we really started our first prototype. And the next very important milestone for MySugr was that we received a first grant from AWS, and that grant helped us. It was let me think about it. When was it? It was in 2011. So beginning of 2011, we received that grant, and that was kind of our real start into MySugr, because that enabled us to quit our day jobs and really concentrate on developing MySugr.
I think, as I usually do, I stalk the people that I invite, that we invite. The first mention I found of MySugr, which is quite funny, is on TechCrunch regarding the startup weekend. What was it called actually? It's now Pioneers, which is well known. So that was before or after the grant that you did that? There was like an on stage in MySugr in the health sector. It was like only a small article, and you were mentioned as one of the how like explosive the European startups in. It was MySugr and nobody else, and I was like, great, they have to be great if they're only company mentioned. But like, was that already before or was it after?
No, that was after we received that grant, and we went there basically with just a prototype, and that was awesome because the product wasn't already available on the market. But anyhow, we convinced the jury to vote for us, and that of course that gave us. I mean, you found that first piece of something about us, and that's on TechCrunch. That's awesome because we really had just a couple of slides, a good pitch deck, and a prototype product, and that of course kind of really draw a lot of attention to MySugr, and also helped us of course to get to know and to convince Hansi to invest into us. And Hansi was the first business angel, the first real investor who invested into MySugr.
Yeah. So before we come to Hansi, so you're not 4 co-founders. Do you all share like the same percentage of the company? How do you work as 4 co-founders? Like, there's this you can read about that. There's of course there's the optimal startup, which is 2 to 3 founders, this and this space, blah blah blah, a lot. So no singular founders, and most of the people say no 4 founders or 5 founders is the line. So how is daily work? Is it struggling or is it like of course not? Like, how is it working as 4 co-founders with an idea which I don't know? Was it by 2 people or was it by 3 people?
Yeah, it's of course the more people are involved, the more complex it gets. And I still find today, the most challenging thing is definitely to work with people, basically to kind of organize the whole organization, to manage growth. And the first thing is, of course, when you're 4 co-founders, you need to get along with each other. And I just knew Gerald very well, but I didn't knew really the other guys. We kind of so everybody who started MySugr started with the same percentage, but we have had a very tough vesting scheme simply. So we were challenging each other, and if you perform, you get more shares. If you don't perform, you don't get shares. That was a very simple approach that worked well for us. And although we had this, very, I mean, I don't know how I don't know a lot of other companies who did that like we did it, but for us it worked out quite well. And of course there was a lot of fights, struggling, and everything. But I think the cool thing was that everybody of the co-founding team had always the vision in mind and wanted to reach something, and that kept us going through all the years. And there's still a very good understanding amongst each other, although we challenge us hard.
I think that's quite a good teamwork if you can challenge each other and still go on a beer afterwards. I think that's the most important one. And talking about challenging, I've heard he's challenging, but he's also one of the most supportive persons in the Austrian startup scene, and he was with us last month. How did you meet Hansi, and how did that get along? Because you were, I think not his. You were quite an early investment as far as I found out, but maybe not until he now has 31 investments or so. But you were quite an early investment. So how did that work out? How did you meet him? Where did you meet him? And how was that whole process with him?
Yeah, that was quite a funny process because after that TechCrunch event, or I mean it was Start Europe, so that was the predecessor thing of what is today called Pioneers, and so after we won that event, a lot of venture capital companies approached us, wanted to meet us, and we felt very cool because all these important VC companies approach us now, and we flew to London, Berlin, and presented in front of these guys. And but to be honest, we never had a real good feeling with them because we were pretty young as a company, didn't really have the product, the market fit. So it was a pretty early stage for us, and we just felt not really ready for a VC company. And and we also met Hansi at this event, basically. So I remember very well that I sat back in the days with Hansi after pitching on stage, and Hansi was just expressed his interest in us, and we said, okay, great. I didn't know Hansi. I have never heard of him before. I mean, today he's a hot shot, but for me, I don't know. I just didn't know him back then, and we made this VC round, and then we thought, no, that's not what we want. And I mean, let's talk again with Hansi. And I remember very well. I mean, at that table here, everything started. So we, as MySugr, we started in Sector 5, and I remember very well that we sat in this meeting room, this small meeting room with Hansi, and everybody in the team had directly the feeling that he's just the right guy, and we want him on board. And it was more of a gut feeling thing than anything else. And it was absolutely the right decision.
So Hansi was your first investment. Like, what was his first goals? What was he saying that we need to achieve in the first, I don't know, 12 months? Or what was his approach? Because he surely had some idea about where he wants to go with you, of course, as well. And also your vision combined with, of course, he has got background in the pharmacy sector and knows a bit about health.
Yeah,
so
yeah. No, of course. I mean, Hansi, I mean, he has his pharma background, and he also, so that's why he also knows how sometimes slow the whole industry moves, and that a lot of things are currently changing in pharma, but these changes take a long time. So he knew that from the start. That was important for us. But on the other hand, I mean, he gave us milestones. So we had clear milestones which we needed to achieve to receive ongoing investments from him, and yeah, that was the case. But these milestones are rather milestones. I mean, they are always achievable, so that you can reach them if you behave normally. And that was his approach towards us, and I think it absolutely worked out pretty well. Because also for him, I'm sure Hansi shared his investment visions with you here on stage. Hansi predominantly invests into teams, into people, because I mean, and there he's absolutely right. If you invest into the right people, they will find the business. Although maybe in a very early stage of a company, one has not the real clue and the final solution about how to make money. But if you're smart enough, you'll find it out on your journey.
So you went through another 2 rounds of investment, as far as I know, and then you recently won a little piece of money at like TV advertising time, which I didn't know before this event. So let's talk first about those investment rounds, maybe about the combination as how did the product develop and how did that work out with further investment rounds? Because a lot of people I talked to who did rounds said, yeah, one of our founders was 100% or 60% or 80% only on the funding, because it takes so much time and effort with VCs and flying there, going there, pitching there. You know, a lot of people only see that the final outcome and they say there's so and so much in Series A, whatever, but that is a lot of work. So how did that work out? Did it like limit you in the product side, or how did you manage all that?
Yeah, I mean, when Hansi invested, we hardly had a product, and so that was at a very, very early stage. And we, in the first year, I think we had something like, 5,000, 10,000 registrations, so really a limited amount of people who knew about us, because we were still shaping the product setup properly. We then in mid 2013 we launched in the US, and that was an extremely important step for us. It's maybe important to know that we are a medical device, so we are only allowed to launch in markets where we have the regulatory sign-off. So, and we applied as the FDA to get the regulatory approval in the United States. And when we launched there, our user growth directly, accelerated by 300-400%. And also today, we have 300,000 registered users right now, and more than 60% are today US based. So that is our most important market. Was a very important step for us, because then it was the first time that we could really show traction and a really good growth pace. And that was 2013. We then, beginning 2014, we had a next round of investments with the Group, so another private investor from Austria, but also the first VC company who invested into us. It was XL Health from Berlin. And we choose them very, very wisely, because it's an interesting investor. They're specialized in healthcare, They are backed by the CEO of CompuGroup Medical, one of the biggest manufacturers of doctors' information systems. And it was important to us always to have people on board, like for example Hansi and then XL Health, who come from the pharma industry, from the healthcare sector, and who really understand what we are doing, and who can of course also help us to develop more business. And so that was this round, and we
Maybe we should talk a bit more about the product. I don't know how many people with diabetes are in the room. You should show your hand. It's not that much, so maybe you should explain a bit more. What is your product in total? Like what it all contains. We read a lot about you. Of course, I had a great look at it because as preparation also it was kind of interesting, and also a friend of mine uses it. But like, how big is the market actually, and what is your product actually? So that it only sounds like something for people with diabetes, but what is it you actually do? I think that might be an interesting part.
Yeah, of course. So, diabetes is an extremely complex disease. For example, with myself, I was diagnosed at the age of 20, and all of a sudden, your life totally changes, because the islet cells who produce insulin there's an autoimmune reaction by your body, and they are destroyed. And so for example, I do not produce any insulin at all. So that means I permanently need to inject insulin. I have an insulin pump, and with that insulin pump, I'm injecting insulin. I always need to inject insulin when I eat carbohydrates, and so basically whenever I eat, for example, a slice of bread, rice, whenever there is carbohydrates in the meal, I need to inject insulin, and I need to calculate how much insulin I need to inject based on the amounts of carbohydrates I eat and by the level of the blood sugar. And I need to test it with a finger prick, a bit of blood, and then I get a value. And so it's really complex to handle all that stuff permanently. The diabetes, as of today, you can't cure it, and you have it until the end of your life, basically. And so the point with diabetes therapy is that you permanently need to deal with numbers, with data. So the level of your blood sugar, the grams of carbohydrates you eat, and the units of insulin you need to inject. And there's another factor, which is physical activity. So if I move a lot, if I run, for example, I need less insulin, and my blood sugar decreases. And so I mean, it's data. And it's also a question of the optimization of this data, and that's where traditionally a diabetes diary comes into play. So people with diabetes should always note their numbers on a diary, on a paper-based diary. And what we do in the first step, we digitalize these paper-based diary. The other point is that as diabetes is a lifelong burden, you must be motivated every single day to take care about your diabetes. And that's a very important part of MySugr, is not only that we digitalize this diary, this paper diary, but also that we motivate people to keep an active part in their diabetes therapy, and we motivate them with a couple of gamification elements, like they win points when they get active in their therapy. We have a little diabetes monster which gives them direct, ultimate feedback on the values they enter, and we let our users play health challenges which motivates them to continue with their therapy, and these are all factors which are extremely important in your diabetes therapy. So aggregate data and keep you motivated to aggregate this data. And of course a lot more, because so a very important and interesting aspect today in the development of the healthcare sector is, you all heard about wearables and connected devices. And it's really cool that right now on the market there are the first Bluetooth-enabled blood glucose meters, and we directly synchronize with these meters. So as of today, there are two Bluetooth meters that synchronize with MySugr over Bluetooth, and one that you can plug into an iPhone, and that kind of pulls data out of this device into the MySugr application. We also integrate with Apple Health, which is also really awesome because I just mentioned that physical activity, for example, is important for diabetes therapy. So you get your Runtastic runs into the MySugr app. You get your Weesing's weight, blood pressure into the MySugr app. And so it's an awesome tool to aggregate data and to keep you motivated to really take an active part in your diabetes therapy.
So, okay, so how many people actually have diabetes? So we get a bit of an idea about the market.
Globally, 387 million people have diabetes. In Austria, around 400,000. In Germany, it's around 6 million people with diabetes. There are two different forms of diabetes. So most of the people, around 90%, do have a form which is called type 2 diabetes. That's a bit of a different thing than I have because 80% of these people with type 2 diabetes can treat their diabetes simply by taking a pill. But then there's around 20% of all people with diabetes, they need to inject insulin, just like I need to inject.
That's basically your target group, or?
It's more or less our target group, although we recently, beginning of this year, introduced another product which is called the MySugr Academy. That's an education platform for people with diabetes, which is targeted towards people with type 2 diabetes. But it's a bit of a different thing, yeah.
So I think now it's a bit more clearer because I thought about maybe it's not that clear what you're actually doing, as we only read mostly about you. But if you're not using it because you don't have diabetes, it's a bit different. So we were at the first funding round. So and then you became bigger and got the second funding round. So in these first years until now I don't know how your team got quite big and you now moving to another office and stuff like that. What was the biggest hurdles you had? What were the most things that like got wrong that you learned that you think that somebody who starts a company at the moment or in the next 2 months should think of?
So much.
What are the worst stuff or the best stuff, depending how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's really
sorry, a bit closer to the.
Okay. The most complex thing is definitely to build up a team, to let a team grow. So I mean, we were 4 guys sitting at the table, and right now we are 25 employees working together. It's a permanent challenge to keep everybody, I mean, productive in its best sense, so that is definitely one of biggest challenge we faced. Another thing is, of course, I mean, the first couple of months and also maybe the first 2 years where you need to develop a product that really develops traction on the market. That was challenging, and I mean, we haven't touched the business yet, so maybe I just jumpstart into it. We are a business to consumer company, so we sell our applications directly to people with diabetes over the app stores. So that's pretty simple. It works quite well. But on the other hand, we also do have a business to business part of our business, and it's also a significant revenue stream. And it was really challenging for us to build up that revenue stream because I mean, right now the pharma industry get more and more interested in connected health, in devices, in digital health. But 2-3 years ago, that was totally new for them. And but also, I mean, a part at least of our projection to what our investors was based on generating revenues with the pharma industry. And so that was also for us, it was extremely challenging to get first deals with them because it's a new market and you create new businesses with them. And if you ever have dealt with a large organization of, 100,000 employees plus, it's extremely complex to sell them a product, especially as a very small startup company, of course. But we are still facing that challenge today, not so much on the industry side, because we work with basically every bigger diabetes company. But we face this challenge definitely in the healthcare sector, in the healthcare insurance sector, where because I mean, the ultimate goal is that we make our applications, our services as simply prescribed services by the doctor. So you go to a doctor, you have diabetes, and this doctor should prescribe you to the MySugr applications because they simply make you healthier. And we are in discussions with healthcare insurers. We try to crack this market, but that's challenging. The great thing is there's one innovative player. It's SVA here in Austria. They're the first healthcare insurer who reimburses MySugr applications, and our MySugr Academy, the learning platform. And but that is definitely an ongoing challenge for us to get better traction in the healthcare insurer market.
So, in which markets are you actually working in? We already heard you, of course, now you're working in Austria, in SVA, with the Sozialversicherungsanstalt. We also heard that you work in America at the moment. Which markets are you in, and how did you actually manage the market entry? Like, it's not that easy, is it?
Yeah. So that's maybe also a very interesting learning, because at the end of the day, Austria is really the perfect place for us to be, and the perfect place to start a company like MySugr, because I just mentioned how hard it was to get traction, especially with pharma industry. The good thing is here in Austria, it's just a lot easier to approach these companies because they have smaller offices. You know somebody who knows somebody who works there. You get a first meeting. You get a second meeting. You get a first deal. And the good thing is that these are global companies, of course. And if it works well, they internally communicate it to. In our case, mostly it was the thing that we started cooperations with the Austrian outlet. They communicated it to their German counterparts, and so we grew internally, country by country, more or less. That was a very interesting route for us. And I think if we would have been based, for example, in Germany, we would have had a much harder time, if not maybe impossible, to get this first deal. Because the market is way bigger, of course, compared to Austria. And today we are active. I mean, Austria is our home market. We launch our application and services always the first time here, try it out and see how people react to that, be it industry, be it consumers, and then scale up. The next step is always Germany and then the United States, and these three markets are also our most important markets. So and most of our users are in these markets, but also most of our business partners are in these markets.
Maybe we can switch over to the future. The first question would be: I've heard you got a great deal of money now for advertising. So my question is, what are you going to do with it? And the second, and probably more future-oriented question is, what is the future in health? Like, how do you, for example, see China for your product, but also in general for the health industry? And also, I see more and more startups in Austria now in the health sector, which is good. But what would you suggest to them, and what do you think? What's the future here? What is the big opportunities awaiting, and what's your outlook for the next couple of years? Because
I mean, in general, I think that there are just a few people who really understood how big of an impact technology will have on our health. Not only data, but also really great new technologies, which meaning not pharma technologies, not biotech so much, but rather really tech, like IT tech. It is, for example, when I was diagnosed back in the days, the doctors that told me, okay, in like 10 years there will be a gene therapy and you will be cured. So 20 years after, I'm not cured. But
nobody talks anymore about gene therapy.
No, and that's the point, and that's not where currently we see the most interesting developments. The most interesting developments we see, for example, in sensor technologies who give you continuous blood glucose values every 2 minutes, and these are now connected to insulin pumps. And they can directly, based on the value these sensor technologies sensed from your blood sugar levels, inject you insulin, and it's called a closed loop system, and it basically does the same thing. Then my pancreas does not do. But I will be maybe one day be cured by technologies. I mean, that's maybe another 8 to 10 years ago in the future, but that's extremely realistic because there are clinical trials already with these technologies, and it's really foreseeable that these products will hit the market one day. Regarding, I mean, your questions with China, it's yeah, it's of course a huge opportunity, and I think even most diabetics in terms of numbers are living in China. And I don't know if I told you that, if you knew that, and if you asked,
I didn't know anything about China.
Okay,
and you,
okay.
so
No, because I just mentioned it because one of our very new investors, it's called iSeed, and it's a very interesting fund, also specialized in healthcare, and they do have offices in Beijing and in San Francisco, and through them we also right now have first kind of well relationships into China, and that's something that for us at least a couple of years down the roadmap, but we already kind of think about how we can one day maybe get into this market.
So the future of health, you see in a lot of little devices or a lot of small tech that can make life much better, or like with less complexity than maybe gene therapy.
Yeah, you know, and the point is that in my opinion, technology, also very simple technologies can help a lot. There is unfortunately a bit of a resistance from doctors and the healthcare system to introduce these technologies. But you know, for example, a simple medication check, you know, that checks that somebody takes a blood pressure pill and another pill, and these pills interfere with each other. Very often is not performed because information are not available. You go to one doctor, he prescribes you on a blood pressure pill. You go to another doctor, he prescribes you on whatever other pill. And there should be just one system that aggregates this information and gives you an alert that somebody prescribed you on a silly drug. These are very simple things, but they are not yet. I mean, technology-wise, they are so super simple to introduce, but they're not yet there because of political reasons, and that's not good. You know?
Yeah, but there is of course this discussion about data protection. I'm a big fan of, for example, what you said about the medicine, that this doesn't work in Austria still is a kind of bit weird, but anyway. On the other side, everybody, of course, will say, okay, MySugr then knows everything about me, and if in another system like Austria, he'd sell it to the insurance company, they will then, I don't know, rate me up and I will pay 300 euros more a month or whatever. So that's an discussion that you always hear. How do you see that discussion? And is it overrated, or is it simply something that will be happening in the future? Because with all the data available, with more and more sensors that are currently coming out, we will know much more about ourselves, our body, maybe about groups of people, how they interact. When we see MERS now, MERS in Asia, what's your point of view on that?
So that is an extremely serious thing, and you know, I wouldn't want that my insurance company knows everything about my medical data. No way. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's a lot of power in this medical data, and I think we should be more open to take advantage of that. But I'm a big fan of good data privacy protection laws, and you should only make your data available to companies you really trust. And but I also think that, you know, most companies, medical device companies, also startup companies who have good backers are. I mean, you can see it from how an application looks, who invested into a company, if that is a serious thing, and they probably, you know, will do something good with the data and not sell it to an insurance company or do whatever with that. You know? So I think there's you will have a much higher chance that something good happens with your data than something weird is done with that.
Okay, thanks. So switching over now to questions and answers session, and as always, I'm gonna ask if somebody has a question. I'm gonna repeat it, so we've got it on for our video online, and then you can answer. So, if there are any questions currently, Marcus. So So the question was, when you started as 4 people here at this table over there, it seems, how much time, energy did everybody invest? Was everybody already in full time? Were they in team part time in the beginning? So how did that work out in the beginning?
When we went to that desk, I think everybody was already full time there with 150%. So yeah, and it does only work if you work 150%. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
I actually have 2 questions. The first one is, you talked a lot about challenges, but looking back now 4 or 5 years for MySugr, what would you have done differently? Are there some things you now see completely different and would have approached differently? And the second question is, if there would come an investor right now offering you a good deal, would you sell? Why not?
So there was 2 questions. First one was if there's like these big learnings, like something that you definitely now know that you should do differently from looking back the last years. And the second question was, if somebody comes here with a big bucket full of money and says, I'm going to buy from you, would you sell now at this stage if it is enough money? And for what reason, or if not, why not?
Yeah, so the first question is regarding, what we would have done differently. I mean, in my opinion, one of the major challenges is always to be really laser focused, and once in a while you fall in love with a kind of a side project. You do some things that are not really in your focus, and at the end of the day, very often that turned out to be kind of a wasted time. And so keeping the focus, that's definitely something, keeping the focus better, that is definitely something that we should have done more in the last years. Regarding a potential investor, that's always so hard to say, because, I mean, if somebody would come with a super crazy sum, of course one would think about it, but on the other hand, it's something that really gives, I mean, most of the MySugr employees are, I mean, also I'm personally, as a diabetic, I'm so much into what I do every day, and I can't imagine to work somewhere else, and I wouldn't want to sell it for no reason, because, I mean, it's not only money that keeps us going, but also, I mean, that's a higher meaning behind what we are doing, and I want to be able to work on that thing for the next couple of years, and so definitely now I wouldn't want to sell that. No.
May I add a little sub-question on the first part? Was it an advantage or a disadvantage, not that big, but your co-founding situation? So did those 4 partners keep each other unfocused, or was it only that everybody had these little side projects in the beginning until you figured out, guys, we need to be more and more focused? I know the thing from myself.
No, it was rather, I mean, most of the decisions we make jointly, and we decide, okay, we develop that feature or this feature, and that defocusing, we always kept and are still keeping the strict focus on diabetes, for example. But to give you one example, we learned that we are very bad in developing good websites, for example. We are a mobile company, and that's something we learned. But we thought, okay, maybe it's cool that you can also log your blood sugar values on a website. And we developed a product, of course, invested a lot of time into that. And at the end of the day, we learned that people just don't use it. And that's something where we should have been more focused on our mobile experience, and that's at the end of the day, as of today, I would say, was a waste of time to develop this product. But back then, you always think, hey, wow, that would be awesome if somebody would also log the blood sugar values on the web. So,
any more questions? Sorry, the ego was first.
Yeah, I would like to connect to the previous question. So, when you applied for this AVS grant, how committed were you at that point? Were you already full employed, or were you just working another job and also doing this?
So the question was, again, coming back to that, but a bit further, a bit earlier along the line, at the time when you applied for the AWS grant, I don't know which one it was, how committed were you at that stage when you wrote the application, basically?
yeah. So it was a pre-seed grant. I don't know if that still exists, but
It does.
it does. Great. Yeah, because it was really the thing that started everything. I remember that for example, I still had my 9 to 5 job, my normal job, and but it was clear, and I think that was also something we of course communicated to them. If we win that grant, we will focus 100% on MySugr.
I think that's what they actually want.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
you won't get the grant.
All of us, yeah, of course, all of us, yeah, yeah.
Okay, the question in the back. So how is the revenue stream structured? So, in the way to saying how do you make money?
Yeah, so today you pay $2.99 for MySugr per month if you want to use it, or $27.99 per year. So it's a subscription-based B2C model. And on the other hand, we also have kind of a licensing model with the pharma industry. So if we synchronize with devices from a diagnostic company, we charge them licensing fees.
You said it's, for example, SVA does takes over the amount of money that you need to spend on MySugr. How much percentage of your B2C revenue comes through basically this B2B stream, and like how many people pay themselves in percentage? If you can say, if you want to say, it's like
it's I would say it's more or less even thing, and yeah, and you mentioned SVA, so that is something that is a very young business, and we would consider that also B2B business, of course. Yeah.
Questions? There is.
How much do you know about your user base in terms of, first of all, age distribution, and are there like people who try it out and then they don't want to use it, and do you get any feedback from them?
So the question was about the distribution. Like basically, what do you know about your users in terms of like statistical data, but also in general, maybe it might be interesting. And the second part of the question was, if somebody tried it out but didn't, how do you handle that? Can you get feedback from them? Yeah, how do you handle the quality thing, maybe?
Yeah, so we know the age distribution, and the highest percentage of our users are in the age group between 35 and 55. Regarding, I mean, we get like 5,000. I think we got more than 5,500 reviews of our app. So we get a lot of feedback from our users, what they want, what they use, what they want us to develop, for example, as well. And that's also a very, very important source for us for new ideas.
Any more questions? Hannes has a question.
Follow-up question actually to the user groups. So you have now a couple 100,000 users, you said. So I guess different age groups probably could be tailored differently with the app. So what's your thought on actually making one app that fits all versus customizing it to?
So the question was regarding segmentation or customization through different groups, whatever, maybe age, maybe differently. How is your approach? Is it more Facebook-like, let's split it up into different things, or is it more like we build one great user interface and that works for all? What is your approach?
Yeah, so we do a bit of customization, but not based on the age group, but based on the therapy setups. There are a lot of different therapy setups you can have with diabetes. For example, you use an insulin pump, you take a pill, you inject with needles insulin, you have type 2 versus type 1 diabetes. And based on these things, there's a kind of a setup wizard you go through, and once you install the application, the interfaces are customized. But the core user experience is more or less the same. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? Would be the last one, if you want. If not, like there is one more, yeah. So the question was, how do you, after a couple of years, after a couple of funding rounds now, after the product also has developed and you have revenue streams and everything, how do you structure your own, like what the founders get in salary, maybe also how do you define your own goals in combination with your VCs and so on, and those things?
Yeah, so regarding the founding salaries, I mean, the first couple of years, you earn just a very, very limited amount of money, and also a couple of months you earn nothing. So first pay your employees and pay yourself. That's important, and that's something we experienced quite a lot of time, and for really, I mean, the first 3-4 years, because we got more stable regarding the product revenues, but also the bigger the investment rounds get, the more you are also kind of you can take you a better salary, of course. But it was a long process. So I mean, you as a founder probably know that it's a difficult thing, especially at the start.
So it's like maybe a bit more practical approach to that. Do you like have a discussion, like a board meeting is separate where you then discuss that, or is it like, do you have with your board once in a year like normal employees have it a lot, or like how do you discuss those topics anyway? That's a bit more practical as you wanted.
Yeah, so I mean that's the founders' salaries are a discussion with the board. In our case, and of course the employees, they discuss with the management, and I also need to discuss with the board the salary structure of the whole company. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you.